dare you show your face here after what you've done?
I swear I didn't steal anything. Please believe me.
She had been on her feet since 5 in the morning. She had cleaned 3 bathrooms, ironed 12 shirts, prepared a 4-course lunch, and hadn't eaten a single bite since the night before. And when a plate slipped from her tired hands and shattered across the marble kitchen floor, the woman of the house didn't ask if she was okay. She looked down at her. This woman who had given everything just to keep the lights on for her sick mother, and said, with all the venom money can buy, "You are the accident." And Maya just nodded, quietly bent down, and started picking up the pieces. Because that's what she had learned to do her entire life. Pick up the broken pieces of things that weren't even her fault. But what this family didn't know, what no one in that massive estate on the edge of Charlotte, North Carolina, had even stopped to consider, was that the woman on her knees on that cold marble floor was not who they thought she was. She wasn't background noise. She wasn't invisible. And she wasn't disposable. She was the truth they had spent 20 years running from. Before we go further, take a moment to subscribe, like this video, and tell me where you're watching from. It truly means a lot to see how far these stories connect with people around the world. Let me take you back to the beginning, because this story doesn't start in a mansion. It starts in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment on the east side of Charlotte, where a woman named Maya Simmons was counting out quarters on a kitchen table at midnight. Her mother, Diane, lay in the next room, frail, recovering from a second round of chemotherapy, and trying very hard not to be a burden to the daughter who was already carrying the world on her shoulders. Diane would tell her to quit that house every time Maya came home. Every single time. She'd say, "Baby, those people don't deserve you." And Maya would smile that quiet, tired smile of hers and say, "If I lose this job, Mama, we lose everything." 3 months behind on rent. 1 missed paycheck away from the street. That was the reality behind the pressed uniform and the gentle hands. The house Maya worked for belonged to the Caldwell family, one of the wealthiest families in the state. Gerald Caldwell had built his empire from the ground up: real estate, energy, and private equity. The kind of man who walked into rooms and made the air change. His son, Ethan, was quieter, more thoughtful, the kind of man who noticed things other people walked past. And then there was Renee Caldwell, Gerald's wife, a woman who had mastered the art of making cruelty look like class. Renee was the one who had looked down at Maya on the kitchen floor and said those words. But what Renee didn't know, what none of them knew yet, was that the truth about Maya Simmons had been hiding in plain sight inside those walls for months. And it was about to come out. The incident with the plate wasn't the first time, and everyone in that house knew it. Renee had a talent for making Maya feel small. A sharp look when she walked too slowly. A snap command when breakfast was 2 minutes late. A raised voice over a crease that wasn't quite right in a blouse. She treated Maya the way some people treat furniture. Useful until it inconveniences you, then disposable. But Ethan watched all of this, and it bothered him in a way he couldn't quite explain. One evening, after a particularly brutal day, Maya had left her mother's locket on the kitchen counter, a small silver chain with a faded photo inside. It must have slipped from her pocket. It wasn't worth anything in dollars, but the way Maya looked when she realized she didn't have it anymore. That look told Ethan everything he needed to know about how much it meant to her. He drove it to her apartment that night. He almost didn't go in. But when Maya opened the door and he saw the peeling wallpaper, the folding table with the medical bills stacked neatly in a pile, and the tiny lamp casting yellow light over a woman sitting in a chair who had clearly been crying, he stepped inside. Her mother, Diane, looked up at him with cautious eyes. "He's my employer's son," Maya said quickly, as if she were bracing for judgment. But Ethan just nodded. He handed over the locket. He said, "It looked like it mattered to you." When he came home that night, Renee was waiting. "You went where?" "Her apartment. She left something behind." "You drove to some neighborhood for a maid?" The word landed like a slap. "Ethan, you are embarrassing this family." "She has a name," he said quietly. Renee stared at him. And in that moment, something shifted, some long-buried alarm inside her that she didn't fully understand yet. "I want her gone," she said. "That's not happening. How far are you willing to push this?" He didn't answer, but she had already made up her mind. If you're feeling something watching this story unfold, stay with me, because what happens next changes everything. The watch went missing on a Tuesday. Gerald Caldwell's custom-engraved watch, worth more than Maya made in a year, was gone from his nightstand. And before anyone could blink, Renee was pointing fingers. Search her room. Now. Maya stood in the hallway, her face a mask of quiet disbelief, while two staff members went through her belongings. She kept saying, I didn't take it. I swear on my mother's life, I didn't take it. Nobody listened. Or almost nobody. Ethan stood between Maya and the accusation like a wall. Check the cameras, he said. Right now? Check every frame. And when they did, the cameras told the truth. The watch had never been taken. Renee had moved it herself, placed it in a drawer, and then reported it missing. She had stood in front of her husband and her son and let them believe a lie because she needed a reason. She needed Maya out of that house. Gerald watched the footage in silence for a long time. Then he looked at his wife. You raised your hand at her. Renee had, in the chaos, grabbed Maya's arm. Hard enough to leave a mark. Gerald, she's just... Don't, he said. And his voice was a different thing now. Something harder. Something that came from a place deeper than anger. You will never touch her again. Do you understand me? It was the way he said it. Not a protective employer. Not righteous anger. Something else. Something more. Later that night, Maya was in the hallway when she passed Gerald's private study and noticed a framed photograph on his desk. One she had never seen before. A young woman. Beautiful. Dark eyes. A gentle smile. She stopped. Looked closer. Something about the woman in that photograph made Maya's hands go cold. She looked almost exactly like her mother. Like Diane. But younger. A version of her mother from before the illness, before the grief, before everything. She reached out and touched the edge of the frame. Gerald walked in. Don't touch that. The words came out fast and sharp, sharper than he'd intended. He caught himself, lowered his voice. I'm sorry. Just, please don't touch it. Maya pulled her hand back. I'm sorry. Was she family? A long pause. Yes, Gerald said finally. She was. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. The cruelty didn't stop, but the nature of it changed. Now it had a desperation to it. Renee screamed at Maya over coffee, over a steamed dress, over nothing. She pushed harder, worked her longer, and gave her no room to rest. Maya had stopped eating lunch entirely. She just didn't have time. The other staff noticed. They would slide things to her quietly. A roll, a cup of water, small kindnesses from the people who understood what it meant to be invisible in someone else's house. And then one evening, Gerald himself told her to sit at the dinner table. The room went silent. Maya stood there in her uniform and said, It's okay, sir. I can eat in the kitchen. Sit down, Maya. Renee's jaw tightened. You can't be serious. She hasn't eaten all day, Gerald said. Quietly. Simply. She is staff. And she is human. Sit down, Maya. The look on Renee's face in that moment, it wasn't just anger. It was fear. Like a woman who could feel the ground shifting under her feet and didn't know why. Later, Maya found Ethan waiting by the back door. You don't have to keep running every time something happens, he said. It doesn't change anything, she told him. In this house, I feel invisible. Like I could disappear and nobody would even know. I would know, he said. My father would know. We see you, Maya. She looked at him for a moment. This man who kept showing up in the places where she had stopped expecting anyone to be. And something cracked open a little. Just a little. Why? She asked. Because you matter more than you think, he said. More than anyone in this house has let you believe. She didn't know, in that moment, just how true those words were. It happened fast, the way catastrophic things always do. A confrontation in the hallway. Maya was standing firm for the first time, saying clearly and plainly that she had not stolen anything, that she had never stolen anything, and that she was tired of being treated as though she had. And then Gerald was on the floor. His hand went to his chest. His face went pale, and everything stopped. Call an ambulance. Now, Ethan was on his knees next to his father before anyone else moved. Maya was right beside him, her hand on Gerald's arm, her voice low and steady. Stay with me. Stay right here. In the ambulance, in and out of consciousness, Gerald grabbed Ethan's hand and said something. Just a few words. The paramedics pushed in, and the words were lost. But Ethan had heard the beginning. Zoe is. He just didn't hear the end. At the hospital, while Gerald lay stabilized in a quiet room, Renee and Ethan sat in the corridor in silence. Renee kept saying it was Maya's fault, that the stress of her presence, her defiance, had caused it. But Ethan wasn't listening. He was thinking about the way his father had looked at Maya, the way his voice changed around her, the photograph on the desk, the old grief that lived somewhere behind Gerald Caldwell's eyes. Something isn't right, he kept thinking. He went and got Maya out of the custody situation. Renee had engineered some false accusation that had landed her in a police holding room overnight. He drove to get her himself. "You believed me," she said when she saw him. "I always did," he said. Maya asked about Gerald first. "Is he okay?" "He's going to be fine." She exhaled. "He collapsed because of me." "No," Ethan said firmly. "He collapsed because the truth has been buried for too long." She looked at him. "What truth?" He shook his head slowly. "I'm not sure yet, but I think we're both about to find out. Whatever you're feeling right now, just wait. Because the truth that comes next, I promise you, it will take your breath away." Gerald Caldwell woke up on a Thursday morning and asked for two things: his lawyer and Maya. Ethan sat at the foot of the hospital bed. Renee stood near the window, arms crossed, a cold, unreadable expression on her face. And Maya stood near the door, unsure whether she was allowed to be in the room at all. Gerald looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "I have to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything." She nodded. 23 years ago, I fell in love with a woman named Diane." The room froze. "She worked for me. She was the most genuine person I had ever met in my life. Kind. Steady. She didn't want anything from me except the truth. And I gave her my heart." Maya's legs stopped working. She sat down in the chair behind her without even realizing she had moved. She became pregnant. "I told her I would leave everything. I meant it. But Renee found out." Gerald closed his eyes briefly. "She went to Diane. Told her things. Did things. Threatened things. By the time I understood what had happened, Diane was gone. And she had told me, through someone else, to never come near her or the child again. That she wanted nothing to do with me or my world. So I respected that," he said quietly. "As much as it destroyed me, I respected it." Maya couldn't speak. "Years later, when you were grown," Gerald continued, "I couldn't stay away anymore. I needed to know you were okay. I arranged for you to be hired here. Through someone I trusted. I knew who you were from the moment you walked through that door." The silence in the room was so complete that everyone could hear the machines humming in the hallway. "You knew," Maya whispered. "Yes. You watched me scrub floors. You watched her treat me like." "I know." His voice broke. "I know what I allowed. And I will spend the rest of my life answering for it. You deserved a father. You deserve to know. And I failed you. Both of you. I failed your mother, and I failed you. So I'm really. You are my daughter," Gerald said. "My only biological child. And I am so sorry it took this long for you to know it." Renee made a sound in the corner of the room, something between a laugh and a gasp, and walked out. Ethan sat very still, and Maya Simmons, the woman they had called just a maid, pressed both hands over her mouth and let 23 years of unanswered questions pour out of her in silence. Gerald recovered. He was transferred home within the week, and Maya stayed by his side during those first fragile days, not as the maid, but as herself. She brought him his medication and argued with him about resting and beat him twice at chess and made him laugh in a way his son said he hadn't heard in years. Ethan watched all of it and felt something settle in him, like a wound that had finally started to close. Gerald announced his plans publicly. He was seeking further medical treatment and would be stepping back from the company. In his absence, he named Maya as heir to the Caldwell Group, all assets, all holdings, effective immediately. Renee's reaction was exactly what you'd expect. The day Maya walked into Caldwell Group headquarters for the first time as CEO, Renee called in old loyalties, whispered into the right ears, and began pulling threads. Within 2 weeks, confidential financial records had been leaked to the press. Caldwell Group stock dropped 12% in a single morning. Cameras were everywhere, shouting questions about whether the new CEO, a woman who had been mopping floors 3 months earlier, was qualified to lead. Maya stood in front of those cameras and said nothing, not because she had nothing to say, but because she had learned, a long time ago, that the people who needed to scream the loudest usually had the most to hide. She was right. The leak was traced back internally. The documents were fake, the offshore transfers were constructed, and every thread led back to one person. And then came the night someone tried to run Ethan off the road. That was when everything stopped being about business. The police investigation moved quickly after that. The evidence was too clean, too thorough, too carefully assembled, the kind of thing that only happens when people underestimate the quiet ones. Corporate fraud, evidence tampering, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Renee Caldwell was arrested on a Tuesday morning. She looked, for just one moment, like someone who finally understood what she had done. And then the mask came back, and she looked at Gerald and said, "You can't let them do this." And Gerald Caldwell, who had given her everything for decades, looked back at her and said, "You did this to yourself." There was one more secret. A woman arrived from out of state, older now, thinner, with eyes that had seen too much. She walked into the Caldwell house and asked for Gerald. "I'm here for my daughter," she said. And Gerald went very still, because standing in his doorway was a woman the world had been told was dead. Diane Simmons was alive. She had let him believe otherwise, or someone had, and she had allowed it, to protect herself and her daughter from the world he represented. She had spent 23 years building a small, quiet life, and she had never stopped loving a man she had decided she couldn't trust. She wasn't there for the reunion. She was there for Maya. But what happened instead? In a room full of old grief and new truth and a daughter who stood between them asking why, was something more complicated and more human than any of them had planned for. "You said she was dead," Maya said to Gerald. "I believed she was," he said. "I was told." "Who told you?" He looked at the floor, and then they both looked at the woman by the window. And she said quietly, "I did what I thought I had to do. To protect us. To protect you." "You lied," Maya said. "You both did." Neither of them denied it. Take a breath. I need a second too. Because here's the part that gets me every time I think about this story. Maya Simmons spent years in a house where she was invisible. She was talked over, worked to the bone, accused of things she didn't do, and looked through like she wasn't even there. The people in that house reduced her entire existence down to a title, the Maid, as if a word could contain a whole human life. But she never stopped being who she was. She kept showing up. She kept caring. She kept being kind to people who gave her no reason to be. Not because she was a pushover. Not because she didn't notice. But because she understood something that took the people around her much longer to learn. What you carry on the inside doesn't change based on what other people call you on the outside. The day Renee Caldwell walked out of the courtroom in handcuffs, something changed in that house. Not just legally. Not just structurally. Something in the air changed. And the day Maya sat across from Renee in a visiting room and listened to her say, "I was jealous of who you were, not of what she had, but who she was," that was the moment the story finally made sense. Because that's always what cruelty is underneath all the noise. It's fear. It's smallness. It's someone who can't stand the sight of a person who has something they can't buy. Maya looked at the woman who had made her life miserable for months and said, "Money doesn't make someone valuable. Character does. Kindness does. Loyalty does. Love does." Renee sat with that. And Maya, this woman who had started out picking up broken pieces of a shattered plate, extended her hand across the table. "It's never too late," she said. Not because it didn't cost her anything, but because she knew that holding on to bitterness would require her to become someone she never wanted to be. Gerald was recovering well. Diane had agreed, cautiously, to let Maya bridge the distance between them. And Ethan, well, some things don't need to be said directly. Some things just settle into place quietly, the way the right things do. I want to know, which part of this story stayed with you? Was it the moment Maya found out the truth? Or the moment she chose forgiveness anyway? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely read every single one. These are the kinds of stories we tell here on Untold Maid Confessions. Stories about the people who show up quietly, who do the invisible work, who carry more than anyone around them ever stops to see. If this story moved you, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs to be reminded today that who you are is worth more than what you're called. And if you're new here, subscribe and hit the bell. We post new stories every week. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. This has been Untold Maid Confessions. Thank you for watching.